is Warren Vander Hill interviewing Dr. John Beekman, and I'll get an official title here. Lincoln National Corporation Distinguished Professor Emeritus of Actuarial Science and Professor Emeritus of Mathematical Sciences. This is the Ball State Oral History Project, and the date is October 28, 2004. John, I want to thank you very much for agreeing to help me with my project. And I'd like to begin, as one might say at the beginning, by asking you if you tell me a little bit about your educational background, including where you're from, where you grew up. Basically, this question is designed for me to get you to the point where you say, I'm going to accept the position at Ball State.
Okay. Well, I grew up in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and I had some wonderful teachers in high school. And I started college at La Crosse State Teachers College, which in those days was 900 students. I then transferred to the University of Iowa in Iowa City because I wanted to study actuarial science. And also my father had graduated from the University of Iowa in civil engineering. And I graduated from there in 1953. I then went in the Army for 2 years, including spending 1 year in Korea, although mercifully it was a year after the Korean War. I was a year in Korea, and I got to do some applied statistics in Korea. I then came back to the University of Iowa and earned a master's degree in actuarial science. And I took a job with the Minnesota Mutual Life Insurance Company in St. Paul, Minnesota, with the intention of being an actuary for the rest of my life. But when I was in Korea, I had taught an evening class in college algebra, and then at the University of Iowa I had been a graduate assistant, and I loved teaching. And I was beginning to catch on in actuarial science that I might not get to teach as much as I wanted to. So with some trepidation, I went to the University of Minnesota for a PhD in mathematics. And unlike my master's degree, this is harder, quite a bit harder. But I did survive, and I earned a PhD in mathematics in 1963. And at that point, I wanted to go to a college which had at least a master's degree, but I wasn't sure I wanted to go to a really research-dominated university. So my wife and I interviewed Ball State. We interviewed Ohio University in Athens, Ohio, and we considered some other universities of that nature. And we were very impressed with people at Ball State, and we came here in 1963.
When you came here, did you come here, as you look back now, this is a tough question, with the idea of staying here?
No. Okay. No, I didn't. I think I would have. I did have opportunities to leave, and I seriously considered leaving.
Yeah.
But a number of things unfolded which were very reinforcing. I think people at the university, from Richard Burkhardt and others, were very cordial in supporting what I would try to do. And my wife was very pleased with her volunteer efforts, and she did do some speech pathology and audiology with Huckleberry. And we also felt it was an excellent place for our two children to grow up. So, although I had opportunities, and we seriously considered going elsewhere for those various reasons, and we also became very active in our church, and had a lot of friends and kept developing more friends. So.
One of the things that I want to ask you to get a bit more specific about than perhaps some of our colleagues who came here in the 1960s is your interest in research. The point I would make is that you have always seemed to me to be a professor who, for his time, was atypical of our faculty back in the 60s, because you always were interested in what later came to be called scholarly productivity in the parlance of good old BSU. Where did that come from at a time when there really wasn't a reward system that recognized your successes in the area of published work?
Well, it comes from a variety of sources. I had certain key professors at the University of Iowa who were excellent teachers, but they were also excellent researchers. But at the University of Minnesota, it was emphatic. If you were going to survive up there and get a PhD, you had to do research or you might as well leave.
Okay.
In fact, I had a statistics as a minor, and my advisor in that program, I still remember this interview. I talked to him. I said, well, I want to teach and do research. And he quickly told me, well, you better put more emphasis on the research and less on the teaching.
Right.
But mercifully, I did have people in Minnesota who were excellent teachers also. But when I came here, I decided, well, I have spent 11 and a half years of my life in college, which seems unbelievable. It's my duty to keep doing research.
Okay.
And as I say, I have role models at the University of Iowa, University of Minnesota, and University of Michigan, actually. And they kept doing research basically until they died, and that's my intention. But there were also certain key people at Ball State that helped me. You want this now or later?
Anytime you wish.
Well, as I say, we came here in September of 1963, and in the summer of 1964, I taught, as people frequently did in this school.
Right.
But I vowed I needed to do more research. So I applied for and did obtain a research grant from the National Science Foundation, which I was able to prolong for 8 summers. And one of the key people that helped me there was a biology professor, and her husband was a pianist. She was, at the moment I've lost her name, but
oh, yeah.
she went on to become...
Ann Reynolds.
Yeah, Ann Reynolds.
Yeah, right.
Well, at that point, she was the secretary of Sigma Xi, the honorary thing for scientists and so on. And I was in Sigma Xi, so I had prepared this research proposal from the National Science Foundation, and she had such a proposal, a grant from the National Institute of Health. And she looked my thing over, and she gave me some advice. And that helped.
Oh.
And then in those days, I think this is accurate, Dick McKee was in the Office of Research.
Right, yeah.
And he gave me some advice, and those things helped in getting that first grant. So.
Okay. Well, did you do this largely out of a sense of that's what professional faculty in my area of expertise do? Because you couldn't have had a lot of reinforcement from colleagues in your own department, because not very many people in very many departments were doing much research at that time.
That's exactly correct. I didn't have much encouragement from all the colleagues, and also I became a researcher of the year in Ball State. I think Costa was number 1, Gordon Rosine was number 2. I think there was an economist number 3. I was number 4. In those days, if you were the researcher of the year, you got a red rose and a free dinner.
Right.
That was it.
No money.
No money. No money. But that was it.
Yeah.
But they did reinforce what I was doing, and frankly, I partially did it because I figured this is maybe how I can go to a different university. If I want to move to a different university, I have to do research. But as the years flowed by, I caught on, well, you got a better reason for doing research than that. I mean, the real research is because you have had all this training and experience, and you've got to get these thoughts out, because that's the real reason.
Well, isn't another that the way you become recognized by your peers at other institutions, and in your case even in the actuarial science profession, is by doing that kind of research? I mean, you could be the world's greatest teacher, and people might know it in your department or in your college, or maybe a little bit more in the larger university setting, but people don't really know that at the University of Michigan or at the University of Minnesota. It's really your research reputation that keeps up with, shall we say, your progress as a scholar.
That's exactly right. In about 1968, I think that's the year roughly, the first actuarial research conference was started at the University of Michigan, and it rotates with no great planned frequency. It's been held at Ball State twice, in 1979 and 1996.
Yeah.
But you're exactly right. And going to those conferences, you do want to feel like you're part of it, and
Sure.
that you're doing what you would have been doing if you were in Ann Arbor or Iowa City or Madison, Wisconsin.
That's exactly my point.
And yes, indeed.
Yeah. Well, think about the expectations that you had of the role of a faculty member when you came here. What did you think the life of a faculty member was supposed to be like at Ball State back in the 1960s?
Well, it was heavily teaching, and if you stayed here long enough, you got fully promoted. And there are a number of my colleagues who basically let their research be serving in the University Senate and giving delightful speeches in the University Senate.
Right.
And I served in the University Senate 4 years, or was it 6 years, and at least one occasion I actually said something which was worth something. But it was heavily teaching. And although again I give credit to Ball State, somewhere back in there they started the academic year research grants, and I served on a number of research committees at the university level, and also served with Dean Carmen's advisory committee.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was during that committee that I proposed something which eventually was accepted. I proposed that the university offer 2 summer research grants where the person would work 10 weeks but only be paid for 5 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I came up with it, that's exactly what I did the summer of 1964. I earned pay for 5 weeks.
Yeah.
I did unpaid research for 5 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So I proposed that. Well, that eventually was accepted. That's what happened. It went from Carmen's committee over to the university research thing,
Mm-hmm.
and it started with that pretty modest beginning. Now quickly, people called, this is unfair. Why should we be doing research for 10 or 12 weeks and getting paid for 5 weeks?
Right.
So it blossomed up to the 10 weeks. Well,
Yeah.
great. I even had 3 of those grants over the years, but in any event, you're right. It was not common.
In what ways did Ball State change while you were a member of the faculty?
Well, it changed in 3 ways. It changed in the type of classes and the type of advising you gave. It changed in research emphasis, and it changed in the encouragement of professional service outside of Ball State. Those are the 3 ways, and I'd be glad to talk about either.
Well, I want you to contrast that with ways in which you think it's changed. It's stayed the same.
Well, I think it's always had a wonderful and very wholesome attitude towards teaching. I've always witnessed that, and when I came here, the first two years we were in an Army barracks, and that had some advantages because you could hear people on the first floor when your office was on the second floor.
Right.
And the advantage of that was I got to hear some extremely good teachers. We had some teachers from Burris who came over and taught 1 class in the math department. And they were very good teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And Ramon Avila was one of my dear colleagues.
Sure.
And he's a very, very, very good teacher. And so that's changed. That stayed the same. That's definitely stayed the same. I guess the other thing I think which has stayed the same is I think at the top administrative level, there's always been good support for research. I had a few talks with Jack Emmons, but much more so with Burkhardt. And it was very clear to me that Burkhardt really supported research.
Mm-hmm.
And I served on the Graduate Educational Policies Committee for 8 years, and Burkhardt was there all the time, and I was there every Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock. And that was very positive. And so, when the actual science program was getting started, John Proust was very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's been a constant. The top administrators have been very supportive. The other thing which has been constant through the years is I think Ball State has done a very good job in encouraging families to be related to the university. Now, for example, my wife has been involved in a number of ways with the International Student Lives, which help international students in more ways than one. And over the years, the International Dinner in the spring has blossomed and blossomed and blossomed. And that's, I give credit to mainly to the wives, and Sandra Worthing did a fabulous job with that. So those are some of the concepts.
Well, I think there's always been a lot of interest on the part of senior administrators, having been one for a time, in recognizing that 90% of our students come from Indiana. And they really need to know, especially as we've gotten toward the end of last century and the early years of this one, that they are going to be living in what we call the global age, and that they really can't see themselves, as a lot of our students certainly did in the 60s, as Hoosiers who want to continue being Hoosiers and living in Indiana and teaching 10 miles from Muncie, that their frame of reference is a much different one. And I think it's the responsibility of faculty like you certainly, and your wife working in an international area, to let them know that they may be working in, Bangladesh or something like that, and not in Huntington.
That's right.
So I think you're definitely right. Think of some of the, what I call macro systemic changes that occurred at Ball State, and I wonder if they had any impact on you. For example, you'll recall we went through a lot of angst about changing the calendar from quarters to semesters. I mean, did that have any impact on John Beekman as a faculty member, or is that just something that you decided to go with the flow if that's the way it's going to be?
I just went with the flow on that one. The only thing which really did cause some real anxiety, because at that time I was in the University of Senate, when we went to more of a merit pay, and I will never forget that, whatever the right words are, vote of no confidence in John Bruce. That was some of the most painful days of my life. It really contributed really, it was very painful. I guess I'll just put it that way. So that I remember very clearly, but mercifully that was also the exception. That was the only thing which I can think back to, which was really very stressful.
Yeah, because you were impacted in one way by what I call the sea change that occurred in regard to personnel policies of the 1980s, particularly pushed forward by my predecessor as Provost, Jim Cook. And by that I mean, by the time Jim came here, people like us were fully promoted and didn't have to worry about Jim, well, we did in some ways, Jim dumping the fixed salary schedule that we came here to be part of. We didn't have to worry really an awful lot about the new standards for attaining tenure, for the promotion of faculty to associate and full professor. Yet the second part of your career, you're a senior faculty member in your department, and so I guess the question I'm posing is, how do you see that as something that impacted the lives of young faculty who were hired from, say, the mid-1980s on?
Well, I think from the 1980s on, I think they pretty much just accepted it. As I said, it was painful. For example, again, it kind of in the same ballpark. But I was, in those first salary supplements, this involved Bob Bell, I received $2,000. But I was put under so much pressure in the math department that I turned it down. And I had a dear colleague in the physics department who had the same experience. He was put under so much pressure, he turned it down. It was some of the most painful part of my life. And there were two key people in the mathematics department who criticized me boldly, and I'll never forget that. But mercifully, that's water over the dam, and I think the young people now have pretty much inherited that, and they just work with it.
Do you think it's made the lives of those faculty who come here now and know right from the day they arrive at Ball State that they really have to get their scholarly program in gear, or they're not going to get tenure, they're not going to make the first promotion to associate professor, contrasted with people like us who came here where there really wasn't that kind of pressure to be overly concerned about attaining tenure and getting your first promotion?
I think it's been healthy. I think that I've observed, you know, the younger people, and I think it's been good for them.
Okay.
I must admit that as I walk up and down the hallways and I observe that the doors are not open as much as when I was there. When I was there, I kept the door open from basically 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock because if a student wants to come by, I'm there to talk.
Yeah.
But I must admit, in today's world, a lot of these people close their doors, and I'm sure they're doing good work. But but I guess in general, it's probably a good thing. I think that it's better, but it has some drawbacks.
Well, the reason I mention it is because the Ball State graduates who are on our Board of Trustees are all people who were here in that old Ball State. And when we made these changes, one of the things I said to them as provost of the university at that time, when they would inquire, how's this going to change the life of a faculty member? I said, I'll tell you one way it's going to change it. You're no longer going to have the incredible amount of what I call schmoozing between faculty and students that you did in the day when you were here as undergraduates. The other thing, going back to the question about quarters and semesters, that by going to semesters, we gave faculty the time to be away from here a good bit if they wanted to be, because recall, in the old quarter system, we had these float hours and you pretty much had to be around here all the time.
Yeah.
By going to semesters, we gave people the opportunity, really, to be here on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday. And the other thing, of course, that's happened, which is a funny kind of geographic thing, we built 332, Indianapolis grew north, and so if you look at the addresses of a lot of faculty in our B-book, you find more people who live on the northern side of Indianapolis, or maybe Noblesville, and come in here 2-3 days a week. And you wouldn't have been able to do that if you were on the quarter system and before you had what I call an easy access point to commute from Indianapolis or Noblesville into Muncie. So I mean, those are just some of the things I've noticed as we've hired faculty in the last 10 years, that one, they know they have to get going and get their work in order to attain tenure and get promoted to associate professor, largely because in most cases, especially in college sciences and humanities, a lot of money involved in the promotion. And the other is that they have options in terms of where they live that you never thought of that. I never thought of that when we came here. You know, you're going to live here, you live in Muncie. You didn't live in Muncie, you bought a farm outside of town or something like that. I mean, it was exotic when I came here for people who live in Yorktown or some other place like that. We started talking about this a little bit, but I'd like you to talk a bit more about people who've had an impact on you in your career, either people here at Ball State, you've mentioned several, or elsewhere.
Okay, well, as I mentioned, although I guess the tape recorder wasn't on when I said this, basically the way I taught was patterned after 7 teachers I had. I had 3 outstanding teachers in high school, one of whom was in mathematics, but one was in history, and one was in English. Then at the University of Iowa, I had 2 outstanding professors, or maybe it was even 3, and one of them, interestingly enough, kept doing research and teaching until he was now 75. And then I had 2 outstanding professors at the University of Minnesota, one of whom was so dynamic in the classroom, you never could quite tell whether you should be taking notes or watching him, because you knew you had to learn everything he was saying, but at the same time it was so wonderful to watch the man. But more to the point, then as the years flowed by, I had certain role models I followed. There were certain people at Ball State who were doing research, some of whom I learned through Sigma Xi. I was in Sigma Xi, I was a president one year, and Dave Costa was, of course, one role model.
Right.
But I quickly caught on to who was doing research in other departments, Dwight Hoover in history, and other people in biology and chemistry and physics. And I could soon discover that in many cases, I had more in common with them than I had with the majority of the mathematics professors. So I gravitated to them wherever I could. But by going to actuarial research conferences in various cities, I also discovered that there was a larger group of people, one key person at the University of Michigan, a couple of people at the University of Iowa, a couple of people at the University of Wisconsin, and expanded to Boston and Harvard and other places. And I looked to them for inspiration, and I basically followed their lead.
So as far as your specific field of expertise, given that there weren't people doing your kind of research here, you really were forced to look at colleagues at other institutions.
That's exactly correct. And when I first came here, I was trying to continue doing the type of research I had done at the University of Minnesota, which was more motivated by quantum mechanics than physics. And from the period 1963 and 1969, we'd go down to Bloomington at least once a year, and I got to visit with some of the physics professors at Bloomington and over to Purdue, and I gave invited talks at both Bloomington and West Lafayette. But you're right, there was nobody
right here.
Right here.
Yeah.
So I did look elsewhere.
You know, to turn this on its head a little bit, you could say, and I've said this to Costello, so you're not the first person I've tried this out on, that given that there weren't people in your area of expertise here, you really became a very big frog in a very small pond. I mean, I used to say to Costello when he was flirting with the notion of going to Ohio State back in the 80s, I said, you know, Dave, if you go to Ohio State, there are tons of Costellos. If you stay at Ball State, you're one of a very few people who are really nurtured and loved, at least maybe not by your colleagues, but certainly by the dean and the provost and the senior administrators here. Did that ever occur to you?
Yeah, it definitely did occur to me. It definitely did occur to me, and I guess yes, it definitely did occur to me. But a couple thoughts run through my head as you say those things.
Yeah.
I always enjoyed my friendship with Dave Costello, and I still do. On rare occasions I see him. But yeah, he was always a good guy to speak with. But you're right, and that was one of the other advantages of going to these conferences in various universities and various cities, because I could kind of compare my life with what my life might have been if I had moved to one of these other places, and I could clearly see some advantages, but there were also some real disadvantages, partially with respect to even my career, but maybe more so with respect to my family. And that meant a great deal to me, So
I'm laughing because I did an interview earlier this week with a theater professor, and I said, well, why did you stay? And he said, well, here I could direct the plays I wanted to direct. If I went to a place like the University of Michigan, where he had some contacts, I probably could direct a main stage play once every 15 years. I'm sure that was somewhat exaggerated, but it still made the point that here you could pretty much do what you wanted to do within your area of interest.
Well, the other thing which took place, I must admit it took a little while for me to catch on to this. But you know, in those first 6 years, 63 to 69, there was no actual science program. But even in those 6 years, I had some outstanding students, but they were kind of, and all the students I had were really a joy to be with. But the ones who wrote honors theses or master's theses with me were the exceptions. There weren't just lots of them. But by contrast, when I got into the actual science program, I had just lots and lots of outstanding students. I mean, I'll still think about this one triumvirate. There was Alan Hobbs, Vince Graneri, and Bob Leone. And these people were just truly outstanding. Another one who came on a little later was John Wilmoth, who of course you remember. And
I remember the other three too, but they were all in the honors college.
I know. That's what I figured. And I worked with 31 students from the honors college, although they weren't all actual science. Some of them predated actual science. But you're right. I slowly caught on. Boy, you've got lots of wonderful people to work with here, and it was such a joy. And it was not totally clear that I would have had as much contact in some other places.
Well, the other atypicality of that, you're mentioning Vince and Bob, is that your program became one of the few undergraduate draws for outstanding honor students from outside of Indiana. So that you had students from, in the case of Bob, New York, in the case of Vince, Ohio. so there were students who came here from a lot of different places. You didn't have just all Hoosier kids. You had a lot of good Hoosier kids,
Yeah.
but you had a lot of students from out of state who came here because they wanted to study actuarial science with you.
That's right. That's right. And there was a few from Minnesota, and
Yeah.
even North Dakota, Wisconsin.
Yeah. Well, keep in mind the atypicality of that too, because I want to get this on the tape. Costell's program was all graduate students. I mean, to my knowledge, except for the occasional honors thesis student, Dave Costel, in his long and storied career at Ball State, never had much contact with undergraduates. Your career here, by contrast, was with really outstanding undergraduate students because, I'll say this if you won't, you couldn't be a dope and take actuarial science. I mean, that's fair to say.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's fair to say.
It's hard.
That's fair to say.
This is not an easy major, as your students continually reminded me
That's
when
right.
I was in charge of honors.
Right.
Tell me a bit about some areas that interested you. You touched on a few, but areas of interest within the university, but outside the math department. And then I want you to talk a little bit about any areas of interest that you've had over the years in the community, involvement that you've had outside of the math department and in the larger community.
Okay, well, let me start with the second part of your question here. Over the years, I've been very involved with our church, which is Holy Trinity Lutheran Church on White River Boulevard.
Right.
I was the treasurer of that church from January 1st, 1975 to December 31st of 1978.
Mm-hmm.
Well, mercifully, the treasurer doesn't count the money. The treasurer just writes the checks, and does lots of other things. Although each of those years I wrote 600 checks.
Wow.
It's a lot of checks.
Yeah, it is.
And you write a monthly financial report for the church. Then I was on the church council for 4 more years in the 1990s, including being president of the church council. But some other things which took place during those years, I was on the development committee for the Girl Scout camp, and I replaced a person from Ball State from the physical plant, and Bob, I don't know, I can't remember his last name. So we did that.
Bob Bantock?
Yeah, it might have been him.
Yeah.
And my wife was involved with a number of things, as I said, the University Wives and Women program, and we also became very involved with the schools that our children went through. Our children went through Anthony Elementary School, Store Middle School, Northside High School, and then our oldest daughter earned a bachelor's degree here at Ball State in math education. And she earned eventually a PhD at the Portland State University, and she's an assistant professor at Oregon Health and Science University. Our younger daughter earned a bachelor's degree at Hope College.
Where is that again?
Yeah, Michigan. And then eventually she came back for a master's degree in student personnel administration. And she lives in Cincinnati. They both are married with 2 children. So we have 4 grandchildren, which we're very happy. Now we get back maybe to other things in the university.
Well, you mentioned you were in the Senate for 6 years, but that hardly was the highlight of your life.
That's exactly correct. There was one thing I did contribute, and I will never forget that because there's an awful lot about it I'd rather forget. But there was a debate about whether the young, because it now relates to the young faculty today. There was a debate, and I won't mention the name, although I'm awfully tempted to, but I won't, who felt that the young faculty should not have the privilege of putting all their money in TIE craft. And I rose up and spoke. I said, I'm an actuary. I've been a consulting actuary. I teach actuarial science. I totally disagree with you. And that person got so mad he walked out of the University of Senate Hall. And I'm tempted to say his name, but I won't. But that was the most constructive part I ever had in there. But the other thing which took place in the university, I was on the graduate committee for 8 years. We met every Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock in the Carina room, and Richard Burker was there, and the dean of the graduate school, and so forth and so on. I was also with the college advisory board, and I was on a couple committees on computer science in the university. In fact, at one point, Dick McKee wanted me to apply for the director of the computer center. But I reasoned that if I did that, that would be the end of me as a mathematician, because you have to change computers every 2 years.
That's right, that's right.
So my luck or wisdom or whatever the right words are, I declined that opportunity. But Sigma Xi was important to me over the years. And the other thing which was important was, for the first 2 years I was here, I was in an Army barracks. Then for 2 years we were in service and stores, and we moved over to what eventually was called the Cooper Science Complex. But the advantage of the Cooper Science Complex was if you wanted to, and I wanted it to, it forced me to interact with physicists and biology people and chemists. And the other thing which took place over the years, as is true of yourself, I tried to be athletic.
And
I was in the bowling league. I bowled against Jack Emmons.
You and Arnold Winning.
Yeah. And I was actually on the Burris bowling team for a while, but that was good. And I always admired some of the people at Burris. They were really some good teachers. So
you mentioned that because you and your wife, I think back, we've made great use of the opportunities to engage in physical activities here. I mean, that's one thing. We were in Montana this summer that we had to join a gym and pay money. Gold gym full of weightlifters like Arnold, the Arnold Schwarzenegger. And here we are, taking all this for granted when we're in town, that we have these terrific facilities that we can engage in. And I know you certainly spent your time in swimming pools.
Well, along those lines, because it sort of relates to some of your interests, we've had a long-time interest in cross-country skiing. And I did a lot of cross-country skiing with Gordon Sleeper and Arbor Sleeper. And there was one grand occasion when, mainly due to Gordon Sleeper, there were 17 of us at the Salamone Dam for quote-unquote cross-country skiing, although the real incentive was you had a hill to go down.
I know,
And we had Ed Ball there, and Virginia Ball was there, and there were 17 of us. And,
it's a great experience.
So we like to cross-country ski over at Mountain State Park.
This is a switch, but get back into your faculty role for a minute and tell me, as you reflect, what you think the proper role of the faculty in governance at a university ought to be. What should the faculty voice appropriately be as John Beekman sees it?
Wow. Well, I think Ball State does have some pretty good opportunities for faculty. I think that the way things are set up, they have the opportunity to elect the chair person. They have opportunities to give advice to the deans, and through the University Senate, they have the opportunities to give advice to the total university. And since we haven't become 30,000 people, there's still opportunity to, on almost a first-name basis, get to know the president, the provost, and the vice president. And so informally, you do have those opportunities. So I guess one area where I think it's a colossal mistake, and I can think of some of my colleagues who I won't mention by name, who basically let their research be trying to that's the wrong word, trying to
take a more activist role.
That's a good way to phrase it. Take a more activist role in the University Senate and in other ways. And I think that's a terrible waste of talent.
Well, let me twist that a little bit. Do you think that the faculty would have been better served here if they had had a faculty senate, which would have given them a singular voice, rather than what many people maintain still to this day, a university senate where you have administrators and students?
Well, I think the university senate is better because I think the faculty most certainly should listen to what the administration has to say and what the students have to say. So I think the current setup is the way it should be.
How do you view the relationship between what's now commonly called town and gown, the university and the community?
I think it's been positive almost all the time. Actually, it was the very first year, I'm reminded of the fact that during the very first year we lived in Muncie, Emmons Auditorium was was started.
Yeah, right.
That was about 7 months after we came to town. And that's been an enormous positive thing for town and gown.
Sure. Okay.
And I think over the years, I think the university has played a very, very positive role in the city, and I've watched with great interest as people, mostly from architecture, but not entirely from architecture, have helped with Cardinal Greenways.
This is maybe a little bit self-serving for me to ask this when you've got university people engaging in the conversation, but do you think that this community really appreciates the role that Ball State plays in it?
A lot of times I'm afraid they don't.
Okay.
I must admit at times I don't think they do, because I think that I agree. And the other thing which I'm not sure the city appreciates, but having lived here this long, it's very apparent what this college has done. Some of the most significant things which took place, as I witnessed it, was the addition of the medical center to Ball State and the College of Architecture. I can still remember when that happened. That was extremely important.
I agree.
And I think that, maybe lots and lots of the city people appreciate that, but I'm not sure it's it's obviously not 100%.
No, I agree with you. I think having the architecture college here, which has its own interesting history as to how it got here, as you know.
Yeah.
And I think Jim Cook creating the College of Fine Arts and bringing those disciplines together, and the part that I was able to play in bringing the communication disciplines together in the College of Communication, Information, and Media, I think those kind of additions and reconfigurations of departments have really served the institution well, rather than what was the case, as you recall, when we went from Teachers College to university. People just sort of politically drew up departmental lines and collegiate lines which had some artificiality to them. The most cumbersome, of course, being the College of Sciences and Humanities in its old days, before these departments were taken out to form new colleges. But I think you're definitely right about that. Do you think the relationship between town and gown has changed significantly over time? I mean, if you think it's pretty good now, I mean, is that sort of what you would have, as you look back, you probably would have said, well, gosh, when I came here in the 60s, it was okay, and now in 2004, it's about the same?
Well, a couple things have changed. I think in terms of the total town's interest in the college, I think that maybe hasn't changed, but what has changed is the ability of certain key people in the town to give lots of money to the university, and that lots of money has done some positive things in terms of buildings and art galleries and bell towers and things of that nature, and now probably more with the football stadium and so on.
Yeah, right. I haven't asked anybody this question, and I've now done about a dozen of these interviews, so you're the captive audience. I mean, do you get ready for this one? Do you see the influence of the Ball family as a positive or a negative on the institution?
Oh, it's definitely positive.
Okay.
Oh, I'm feeling very, very strongly about that. Very, very positive. Very, very positive. In fact, as the years have flowed by, I sometimes kind of thought about what John Purdue gave to eventually get his name, or what Mr. Harvard gave
John Harvard, that's right.
to get his name. And my aching back, I mean, the Ball family gave so much more. And the other thing which has been really interesting for me, starting in 1997, I've been a volunteer at the Militaristic Cultural Center. I'm an interpreter, which means I interpret the Johnny Appleseed tours for the first graders through the fourth graders, and then the maple syrup tours, which is in late March or February, late February, early March, where you we go around and we tap the maple trees, and the little kids, first graders through fourth graders, get to drink the sap, and they get to see how the sap is boiled down.
Yeah.
And but again, it just and now I'm also a so-called campus leader, so occasionally I'll lead people on the militaristic
Yeah,
campus.
I love the fact that now refer to that as a campus, because you don't know this, but with John Worthen and Warren Vander Hill and our long time of working together as president and provost, my shorthand for the Cultural Center was I used to refer to it as the University of Minnetrista.
Gee.
And then Owen started talking about, well, our campus. I said, see? The next thing you'll have beams down here.
Yeah, right. But anyway, anyway, I know, I think the Balls have done so many wonderful things, and as I said,
we're talking about the Ball family.
right, well, again, over the years, my wife and I have had some privileges which, as time marches on, will not exist in the future. I mean, I did mention cross-country skiing with Ed Ball and Virginia Ball, but my wife is in the Daughters of the American Revolution. She was a regent for 2 years, I guess it was, and as such, they met in Alexander and Rosemary Bracken's home.
Yeah.
And I remember visiting with Alexander Bracken about getting an ice skating rink at the university. In fact, one of my passions...
We should have done that, by the way.
Yeah, we should. One of my passions, which, well, I'll just talk a little briefly about. I tried to get the university to build an ice skating rink, and Maury Mann and I and some others, they had a committee. We came up with a program, but there wasn't enough money.
Yeah.
Then I even did something comparable to that with the city, the same deal. We had front page coverage in the newspaper at no money.
Yeah.
But in the process, I did visit with Alexander Bracken about that, and I was very impressed with him.
Yeah.
So, as the years have gone by, there aren't so many balls left anymore. But
not here.
But my opinion is very, very positive.
Okay. Those are the questions I have, but I want to give you an opportunity to add anything you might like to add. Any more reflections that you would like to, shall we say, add for posterity?
Right. There definitely are some things. I guess mainly what I'd like to add is the things I have deposited in the archives and special collections. I was the author or the co-author of more than 50 papers and 3 books. And all of these are in archives and special collections. The first book I authored was published in Sweden. The second book was co-authored with a professor from Harvard on demography. The third book was a book about actual projections for Social Security, and that was co-authored with a professor from Oberlin College. But I've also deposited in archives and special collections 3 autobiographical volumes, some of which relate to Ball State, and I've also deposited some things there which are more current, that is after 1996 when I retired. But
you have your own archive.
Well,
that's wonderful. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Anything else you'd like to add?
Well, I want to thank you, Warren, for this opportunity.
My great
I think
pleasure.
this is I think what you're doing is very important, because as I said to you, I guess before the tape recorder was turned on, I think one of the weaknesses that I can see in Ball State and I guess every university and college in the country is that they don't do enough with history.
Yeah.
So I think what you're doing is extremely important, because if it isn't done, things are gone.
It's lost. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah.